Hello and welcome to the MetaPod Podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. It's finally here. Sean Paldea Evolved has been coming on. Sean, I can't remember because I spent the last week in New York and traveling on a bus for 12 hours to and from upstate New York. Did you compete in a Paldea Evolved pre-release?
I did. I went to 2 yesterday, actually. And then I'm going to another one this evening.
Okay, so how were they? Which pre-release promos did you pull?
I pulled, I think I pulled 2 Tinkaton promos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got like double Tinkaton. The first one was like the Tinkaton United Wings, and then the second one was the Tinkaton and whatever the grass type one is.
I don't remember what the grass type one is, but I do know because I've been seeing Twitter and stuff a lot lately of like people in their pre-release decks, 3-0 pre-release, 3-0 pre-release, stuff like that. And it feels like Tinkaton United Wings is really good. Especially if you like pull like a Baxcalibur line or something like that. Like I think I saw someone, maybe it wasn't with the Tinkaton, but they pulled Baxcalibur United Wings, and I'm just like, wow, you could actually like just kind of dominate that way because you just get consistent damage.
Yeah, the Baxcalibur I think was really powerful. I think that's probably the most powerful one of all of them, to be honest, because you can attach water energy to, I think it's any Pokemon.
Yeah, it's any Pokemon on the field. It can be active, it can be bench.
Exactly. So if you pull any other Pokemon that have like lots of energy requirements, like EXs, but they don't need specific energy, or they only need one of a specific energy, crazy powerful. And the United Wings, though, honestly, I felt that was probably the weakest archetype.
It's interesting because like you don't get an entire like United Wings package, right? You only get the Flamigo and the Murkrow, right?
Yeah, and you might pull a Wattrel, right, in some of the packs, but the problem is between your set and your packs, you might end up with 8 Pokemon that have United Wings, right? Okay, but that means you maxing out at damage at 140, which isn't bad, but that's where you max, and that's assuming you can get all but one into the discard. And it's really hard to get things into the discard. Like those sets only come with like 1 Professor's Research and 1 Ultra Ball. Mm-hmm. And like the Tinkaton one has a benefit of like you can discard with the Tinkaton to draw, but like you still have to get to the stage 2. So it's not a very fast attack. It's just, I don't know. I found that one was actually the weakest probably.
Interesting, because I feel like the most consistent one that I saw was like United Wings.
That's the one that was in the most packs for sure.
Oh, really? Is it like
do
a
you
lot feel like? Okay, so it's like the most common evolution line.
Well, it's the most common package, right? Because you would get. I think you would get you could get Baxcalibur and United Wings, Tinkaton and United Wings. You could get Murkrow as your promo, and then that obviously comes with the United Wings package. So like 3 or 4 of them came with United Wing stuff in it. So I think it was kind of everywhere. But yeah, again, I felt like whenever I played against people that were playing with the heavy United Wings package, it was like turn 4, turn 5, and they're like, I'll do 40 damage.
Yeah.
And it feels so bad.
The typical pre-release experience.
Well, because 40 damage for 2 energy if you're attacking with Flamigo, I'm like, for 2 energy, after like turn 3 or 4, I could be doing 100 damage with half the things that I can pull from a pack, right? So why would I? Yeah, I think it's a trap. That's my gut.
It's interesting. I will be competing in my first pre-release and probably only pre-release, to be honest, tomorrow or today at the day of this podcast releases. So nice. I'll update you all on Twitter how I do, what I pull, all that jazz in a bag of chips. But we have a lot of things to talk about today, including Paldea Evolved. This is the infamous set review, the Metapod Podcast set review. We talked about it and teased about it on Twitter a little bit with the new meme format, which we'll get to later in here in this episode. But Sean, as always, or I would say most times, we got to start off with a review. And this is a special review that was left on our YouTube channel by Nicosaurus, left a comment on last week's podcast episode. We talked about the events and stuff like that. And, you know, because Sean went to Hartford, right? It was Hartford. Yeah, Sean went to Hartford, and there was a lot of conversation in terms of like lunch and things like that, how Hartford didn't have lunch. And Sean and I, only having gone to a minimal amount of IRL major events, we've been to a lot of cups and challenges, but a regional, international, SPE Worlds is a completely different experience and feeling. So Nick kind of gave us a little bit of insight that I thought would be really good as like a follow-up to mention on the show. So there's 2 points in regards to the event discussion. Number one, NAIC's venue, the Greater Columbus Convention Center, is right in the middle of downtown, and it's got its own food vendors, several of which are incredibly close to the event hall, and a whole lot of food that's at the other end. The North Market is about 2 blocks from the convention center and has some nice options as well. If I recall, we did get a lunch break at NAIC last year, so I imagine that will hold true this year, which is a good segue into the second point. Second point, for Fort Wayne, there was a decent lunch break for both TCG and VGC. I think it's up to the TOs of the event, but I also believe another event run by the same TOs that ran Hartford did not have a lunch break. Fortunately, every event I've been to since COVID, the COVID pause has ended, has included one, and have been extremely thankful for that. Even if you don't necessarily use the lunch break to eat, the breaks are just great to kind of chill, let your brain turn off a little bit before taking on the back half of the tournament. Ending it all with great episode as always, you two. And Nicosaurus, thank you so much for the input and also the lovely words at the end. That's really interesting though, especially because Sean and I didn't go to NAIC last year. No. So having a little bit of input, especially for me going into NAIC, you know, prepare a little bit more for potentially, you know, a lunch break. Maybe thinking about, do I pack snacks? Do I look around to see what the options are so I can sneak away? Because some people say like the lunch break sometimes isn't that long, just depending on how long your match goes. Yeah. Per se. So I think it's nice to be a little bit strategic at times and prepare before, especially if you're not as experienced in the events as some of like the top players in the world per se.
Yeah. I mean, you'll get a lunch break at NAIC is what it sounds like, Jake. So
yeah, not official yet, but no. Usually the same TOs I feel like run the same event every year. So it'll probably be the same person running NAIC as usual, unless, you know, something happens, you know, obviously schedules change, things of that nature, but we're looking forward to it. And if you want to see us there, I'll be at NAIC, and you might get something from me if you see me. But anyway, Sean, what are some of the other news that's come out in the Pokemon world in the last week?
I mean, the other news is we have a report here from Poke Beach that is 9.7 billion cards were printed in 2022, Jake. That's a lot of cards.
March 2022 to March 2023, the figures report from Pokemon, yes, saying that this is the third year in a row that Pokemon has broken the annual record. Before 2019, Pokemon was producing an average of 1.5 to 2 billion cards per year. It's also worth noting that in that time window that I mentioned, March 2022 to March 2023, they introduced simplified Chinese cards as the TCG's newest language. So as of March 2023, over 52.9 billion cards worldwide in 14 languages and 89 countries and regions. So, you know, that's insane to think about, Sean.
I mean, if you think about it, Jake, that means that the Pokemon Company, over the last 3 years, right, if it's about 9 billion a year, that's 27 billion cards in 3 years. And if that number is relatively true, of about 52 billion cards, that means more than half of the cards ever printed for Pokemon have been printed in the last 3 years. That's absolutely
it's
wild.
Insane to think about. There's been so much, and you know, the pandemic that hit March 2020, right?
Yeah. March
That was the
2020.
big shutdown. So as of March 2020, in the reports that PokeBeach has received from the Pokemon Company, March 2020 says there were over 30.4 billion cards worldwide in 13 languages in 77 areas. So like you were saying, Sean, since the pandemic hit, they've almost doubled the amount of cards that they've printed in, added a new language as well, and have been introduced in 12 new areas. So it's kind of crazy to think about. You know, we talked about how it used to be that cards were so hard to get.
Yeah.
And then, like, what was it? I think it was after Champions Path, things started getting easier to get at like local card shops because people opened up Champions Path to chase that Charizard.
Yeah.
And then they were like, man, Champions Path sucks.
It does.
so then, but I think Pokemon also at that point, you know, started realizing that, hey, we should probably print more. So then there's not any more reports in like Target that, that people are getting beat up in the parking lot or whatever for taking the last ETB or things like that. And so they've really come through. Pokemon cards, in my opinion, have been the easiest to get in the last several years, even though they're a little bit more expensive as they were before. It's still pretty easy, I feel like, whether it's a holiday set, whether it's a main set release, a pre-release, it's easier to get as of recent years. And there's a lot to do with that, with like COVID restrictions, you know, in terms of a pre-release event, or, you know, allocations and the limitations of the like only one box per purchase per customer. Do you remember those days?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, yeah,
the dark days.
I will say though, like 9 billion cards is the number itself is whatever. It's just a number. But when you compare it to the fact that they were making, or, you know, before 2019, 1.5 to 2 billion cards a year, it's like a fourfold. That's like 4 times as many cards produced every year. And you might say like, well, yeah, some of that might be due to like expansion into other regions, but like, I don't know. It also makes me consider like, dang, the prices of certain cards, how are they going to hold up over time? Like, I don't know what the distribution of that printing is, right? Because like, it may also be that between the League battle decks and like some of the other promotional products, maybe that's where a lot of that excess card might be coming from. So it's actually not, it doesn't actually affect the rarity of some of the other cards. Like, there's still the same number of, you know, fancy alternate art Umbreons as there would have been in 2017. It's just we have 100 times as many Professor's Research in the world.
Yeah, we have 100 times as many Professor's Research and like 50 different arts of those Professor Researches now. But it's just really cool to think about, especially as the card game is growing. You know, more people getting into it all the time, whether that's playing, collecting, things like that. So it's really, really interesting to see how this goes. I just wish a lot of these sales would go into PTCG Live.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, maybe it did, Jake. Maybe we don't know how much it costs to make PTCG Live.
I think not next week's episode will be the full release of PTCG Live, but the week after, so the episode that releases on June 13th, Pokemon TCG Live will move out of beta into a full release. So we'll see. We'll see where it is. I'm curious to see how it is.
Jake, we have one more piece of news before we get into the set review, which I know will take us a while. So do you want to talk about?
There's not too much. Yeah, there's not too much that we'll talk about this one because we've got other things to talk about in terms of the set review. But it was announced that Obsidian Flames has been officially revealed by Pokemon, releasing on August 11th. It's the third Scarlet and Violet set. We've talked about this set. It's going to be releasing Terra Pokemon EX of unusual types, including Darkness type Charizard, Tyranitar EX, Lightning, and other different like kind of Terra types of Pokemon that aren't necessarily their usual types, as I mentioned, you know, the Dark Charizard and things like that. So they showcased, you know, the set's going to feature over 190 cards, 15 Pokemon EX and 6 Terra EX, 12 illustration rare, 6 special illustration rare and supporter cards, 12 ultra rare full art etched Pokemon, and supporter cards, more than 15 trainer cards, 3 hyper rare gold etched cards, showing off a lot of the products as well, the ETB, stuff like that, pack arts, check lane blisters, things like that, the damage counters. The ETB is one that I specifically want to talk about because yes, it's got the cute little Charmander on front, so very, very cool. But this was the talk of the town within the last week. This ETB promo that is coming in Obsidian Flames is so good, in my opinion. Sean, tell us a little bit about this this promo here.
I mean, it's a Charmander. It's amazing. It's just like it's a Charmander whose face is pressed up against the glass of a window, looking out angrily at a Pidgey that's just sitting on the ledge. It's a perfect little piece of like illustration story art.
It is beautiful. Mina Mi Take, I believe that's how you pronounce it correctly, illustrated this art, this beautiful, wonderful Charmander that just makes me chuckle, face pressed up against the window. It has been perfect. You may have seen us on Twitter. It has been perfect for meme template. It's a great meme template. It's just absolutely wonders. And there's been so many funny ones that I've seen on Twitter. We posted one as well if you want to see at Metapod TCG. It's just, I'm excited for this set, especially because longtime listeners may know that I've been so excited for the introduction of Terra types and possible different type, like Delta species, kind of callbacks and stuff like that. And I've been underwhelmed by the Terra EX Pokemon so far. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that they do these like different Terra types and they continue these for like a set or two and not just like fusion Pokemon that were just a one set thing.
Yeah.
Please, please, please.
No, it'll be really, it seems like it'll be a cool set, but Jake, let's talk about the set that's landing on our doorsteps.
A set that's not actually out yet, but it's the next one.
It's not out, but it's out because
it's not out yet entirely, but for the most part, it's out. We know everything that's in it.
So yeah, we got Paldea Evolved over here. We're going to do the set review. As always, big shout out to Justin Basil for his work. Also to PokeBeach. So if we name anything here that's not technically the official card in the set, I know there's like a couple cards that may get cut here and there that we are not fully aware of when recording this. But for the most part, it's like 95% accurate.
Yeah, and a lot of these cards that we'll talk about anyways are cards that we do know are in the set. We've seen from, people opening, because a lot of content creators were able to open up their Pokemon TCG product from the Pokemon company. So we kind of have a good idea about everything in it. But Sean, do you have a specific card that you want to talk about first?
I mean, I think it's worth discussing briefly the Skiploom.
Mm-hmm.
This whole archetype, right? Hoppip, the Skiploom, and the Jumpluff. The whole theme of this is preventing your opponent from doing damage to it. So we've talked about before, like Pokemon that maybe don't give up prize cards. But this one, the Skiploom and the Jumpluff especially, have abilities that say if any damage is done to this Pokemon by attacks, flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. Their attacks are pretty underwhelming. It's like 30 and 30 to the bench, or 60 and 30 to the bench. So it's gonna take you a long time if you're meant to like win by attacking. But if you are not trying to win by attacking and you're trying to win by stalling, I think this is a really interesting archetype. But Jake, what do you think about this? Do you think anybody is gonna play this?
I think there's obviously going to be some people that play at locals, this kind of deck, but I'm trying to think, does like the, what's the Pokemon that I'm thinking of? So like, does Mew, Max Miracle, or Duraludon's attack go through this?
It does.
So I mean, I just think, there's those two right now in the meta that attack through it. There's also the Alolan Vulpix as
Yep.
well in that. So I
Sableye.
don't know. Yeah, Sableye,
It'll just
can
place
get through
damage
this.
counters. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Sableye can just one hit KO a jump skip bloom,
Yeah.
jump
Either
pluff.
one. Or
Yeah,
or a
either
Skiploom.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I you'll get some local people do this, but it's just, and this may be one that you play on ladder as well to just have fun, ruin people's days, get some auto stuff when you hit a heads to prevent the damage and your opponent just rage quits, on ladder. Like that could work, but in terms of a super competitive scene for like regionals and stuff, I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, that's fair. Jake, you want to talk about this fortress?
I do. I love Fortress EX, or I just like Fortress in general. It's such a goofy Pokemon. I love it. I can't wait for this card. Fortress EX, a stage 1, 270 HP Grass EX Pokemon, has the ability Explosive Energy. Once during your turn, you may search your deck for up to 5 basic Grass Energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you'd like. Then shuffle your deck. If you search your deck in this way, this Pokemon is knocked out. So we've seen this kind of style of Pokemon before. Electrode EX is a very good example.
Old school, yeah.
Yeah, old school, just destroying itself and attaching energies everywhere. I think there were baby electrodes as well that did it. We've seen this in different ways as well in Pokemon cards. There was Miss Magius in the Unbroken Bonds era that knocked itself out, and if it did, you got to draw like up to 7 cards in your hand or something. So we've seen this effect time and time again. Keep in mind that we're also getting Iono. So there is really good,
I love that. That's a cool combo.
Yeah, really cool potential to be able to utilize Fortress and Iono like in the same turn. And there's different grass Pokemon that are around that you could potentially be able to power up and be able to attack with like something like Meowscarda, or anything like that. Leafeon is another one that comes to mind that you may be able to do. Or just Wu Chain, which we'll talk about later as well. So there's a lot of different possibilities. There's a lot of cool combos that you can do, and I wouldn't necessarily sleep on this card. May not be the best card, but it may be one that you at least want to know the mechanics of what the deck does.
I would say for me, Jake, this is one where if I were to play a heavy, almost a control style deck where the point is to give up a bunch, because this also, it doesn't say that you can only do this once per turn.
Yeah.
So you could actually, on turn 2, before any prizes were taken, you could Fortress EX twice, fill your deck, fill your bench with like a couple of your Pokemon, really power them up, Iono your opponent down to 2 before they're able to go into Arceus or whatever. And that's actually a really wild strategy. Now, huge risk because now your opponent's down to 2 prizes. But I really think somebody might play around with this combo and find some really nasty stuff.
I would be interested. I don't think it's not in the format anymore. Heroes Metal, if you remember, Heroes Metal said like VMAXs now are 1 prize less, but they have 100 less HP. It would be interesting if either later in this set, I don't know if it's actually in this set, or in a future upcoming set, Pokemon printed some other type of item or tool card, I guess is what I should say now, because it's now a tool card, its own category. A tool card similar to that for EX or Terra type Pokemon that are able to
reduce
reduce the number of prizes HP, because you're probably not attacking with this guy. So
I don't know if Heroes Metal, but I want to say those usually will have things on it that it's like if this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, they take the less prizes, but if you knock it out yourself, then that.
Yeah. So I don't know. It all depends on the wording, all depends on what it's got going, but anyways.
But yeah,
Sean,
I was going to say, like, are there any other grass Pokemon in this set that you think that there could be a payoff for that 5 energy? Stop me if you find one.
I don't necessarily know. I mean, I mentioned Wu Chang earlier, but Meowscarda EX is one that I think we should talk about. You could theoretically power this and many other Pokemon up with the Fortress EX because it does have a 2 colorless attack for 100 plus damage. If your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, this attack does 120 more damage. So doing 220 for just 2 energies is a pretty good payoff for this stage 2 310 EX Pokemon. It also has this ability called Magic Bouquet. You must discard a grass energy card from your hand in order to use this ability. Bouquet.
Bouquet, Jake. It's
Bouquet. Look, I was on a bus for a long time and I'm still drinking the morning coffee. Like, oh, gosh, I'm just tired.
To all of our French and French Canadian listeners.
Just cringing right now. But anyways, if you use this ability on the Meowscarda, you discard a grass energy card from your hand in order to use it. Once during your turn, you may choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and put 3 damage counters on it. So that right there is a great way to reach that 220 damage through the Meowscarda. It is limited to a bench Pokemon, so you're probably going to be playing things like ropes, bosses, any sort of gusting effect in this format to be able to bring the Pokemon up. But pretty interesting because that's like 250 total, and who knows, with another Meowscarda potentially on the field, you could go up to 280, which knocks out a lot of different things in the format.
Also, if you think about Defense Band, right, or Defiance Band, I want to say it is.
Yeah.
So if you are using the Fortress attack, using that where it's like, okay, cool, now I can do an extra 30 on top of that. Yeah, you could easily knock something out. I don't know. There could be a world in which you see a Fortress, Meowscarada, and Rare Candy version of the deck, maybe, where you play a ton of grass energy, you pull them all out of your deck via Energy Search and the Fortress, and you basically try to knock whatever your opponent got set up on the first turn after their hand goes down to like 1 or 2. Just try to knock it out super quick. I don't know. It's interesting.
One that you definitely want to do with Fortress, potentially, because the first attack is a great combo. Wu Chain EX, Sean, if you scroll down a little bit more. Wu Chain, live Wu Chain reaction here on the MedPod podcast. What is this card and what does it do, Sean? Read that first attack for me.
I think it is pronounced Wu Qian, because that is, I'm going to guess. Probably. I think it's a Chinese name, but... the first attack, which I did pull this in my pre-release, for Grass Colorless, it does 60 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. I actually don't think it is benched. It might be one of your opponent's Pokemon.
Is it one of your opponent's Pokemon? Let me double check it.
Yeah, double check that on the Pokemon.
What was the last? What was that last part of the card, Sean? I don't think you mentioned.
Well, yes. For each prize card your opponent has taken. So, to Jake's point, if you do that double Fortress, you power a couple of these dudes up, all of a sudden you're doing 240 damage for every energy that you've already put onto your Pokemon. So 240 damage, second turn, and if you went first, that's enough to knock out any basic Pokemon effectively that's in the format. And the reason I don't know if it's benched is because I think when I was reading the card, I could have gotten it wrong. Pre-release happens all the time. But for some reason in my mind, I don't think it had a benched only clarifier. And then the second... Oh, go ahead.
I'm trying to look right now to see what it is, but I'm not seeing anything online. Like PokeBeach said, it's benched. There's nothing on the Pokemon website.
Well, it's maybe it's benched then. Maybe I'm getting it wrong.
I'm not 100% sure.
But yeah, I could go look at the card that I pulled, but it's too far. But yeah.
Yeah.
And then the second attack for 4 energy, 3 of which are grass, does 220. Pretty straightforward. Biggest downside to this card, I would say, Jake, is it's got 4 retreat cost, which is absolutely wild.
Definitely want to play switches with this card.
Yeah. And being only 230 HP, if you do go that Fortress route, you knock something out, you go down to 2 prizes. If your opponent has any way of taking this Pokemon out on the next turn, then it's all for nothing. So, little scary.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to use Fortress to attach 3 of the 5 energies on this Wu Chen is what you called it?
I think it's Wolchen, yeah.
Wu Chen.
Wolchen.
And then the bench one, like you have to also simultaneously power up a bench one, put the other 2 energies on that, so then the next turn you can just do an attachment from hand or something like that to the Pokemon. So it might take a little bit of comboing, but I think there's potential here. I've seen some lists of this, and I love Fortress, so I might try to play it. I don't know.
Nice. I mean, I again, the Fortress combo, I think people who are not in the like hardcore competitive scene, I think that Fortress on the surface just looks bad. Like, why would I do that? But once you get into it, the fact that they printed Iono in the same set, that is what makes that whole card combination insane.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Sean, do you have the next one, or do you want me to take over the next one?
I mean, I don't have anything off the top. I think for me, I'm just going straight to the Skeledirge. But was there one before that was worth looking at?
I would say the Oricorio a little bit higher. This has been played in some Japanese lists. This Oricorio, it'll be really easy to talk about. Basic Pokemon, 90 HP, fire Pokemon. It has the ability Passionate Dance. Once during your turn, heal 20 damage from your active evolution Pokemon. So alongside potentially, if you don't want to play the Hisuian, the Radiant Serena, that's what it is. The Radiant Serena that heals a lot of Pokemon because you'd rather play like Radiant Greninja or Radiant Alakazam or something like that. You can use this Oricorio to heal damage off of your active evolution Pokemon because evolution Pokemon are getting bigger and better, I would say, in this set. I feel like there's a lot more influence on evolved Pokemon because that also includes VMAXs, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's just active evolution. And I could see this being because Hisuian Gudra, whatever version you play, doesn't really play a lot of benched Pokemon. So I could see like you can run multiple of these because it doesn't say you can only use one of these ability per turn. So if you have 2, 3, heck, maybe even 4 of these on your bench, you are taking 80 less damage and then you are healing 80 damage every turn. That makes like you may not even need to use your Moisture Star for like 3 turns, which I don't know because it's only got 90 HP, which puts you squarely.
It is level ballable.
It's level ball. This is true. It's level ballable. It's also squarely in the sights of Greninja.
Greninja and or Sableye.
Yeah, little scary there, but I don't know. Like, it's a pretty wild Pokemon for that kind of deck, I think.
It'll be interesting to see where it goes, but we'll go down to the Skeledirge EX, Sean, for you. What about this Pokemon that you're seeing, this fire skeleton dragon thing?
So Skeledirge EX has 2 attacks. It's 340 HP, which is really big.
Beefy.
Yeah, like even for like this era of stage 2s, I don't think there's much else out there that's bigger.
Bigger than a Duraludon.
Right. Or Duraludon VMAX, and it only gives up 2 prizes. Its first attack, Vitality Song, does 50 damage. Heal 30 from each of your Pokemon, which is a really weird attack for a fire type, I think. Like, healing is just not a fire type thing, but... and then the second one does 270 minus damage. So 10 less damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So... it's pretty obvious to me that this was meant to be paired with kind of that Oricorio so that if you take damage, you can heal it off. And then, but your first attack, with this, assuming it has no damage counters on it, it's pretty big at 270.
Yeah, I mean, especially with something like Magma Basin in format, right? You have Magma Basin, Oricorio, and Skeledirge. You've got Skeledirge in the active, you have Skeledirge on the bench. Use Magma Basin, right? Gets 2 damage counters off that. If you move it to the active and you have an Oricorio on the bench, you can heal that Magma Basin damage off to be able to just go ahead straight away attack that 270 with it for only 2 energies. And it's really cool, I think, that it has this 270 attack because it also has that healing, like you mentioned, that 30 damage healing, although 30 damage might not matter in the fullest sense.
It's actually really good against Lost Box, right? You think if they're trying to spread damage counters, set up turns, healing 30 damage from each of your Pokemon every time you attack for 50 is really, really annoying, honestly.
Yeah.
So
you have to force them to take like straight up knockouts with those 12 damage counters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or make the math a little bit harder.
Yeah, so I don't know how much play this is going to see necessarily, but it has a couple of interesting things that again I feel like we haven't seen on fire Pokemon much. I don't know if this brings the fire archetype back into relevance just yet, but yeah, there's something now.
There's something in there, but Sean, what's something else that you want to talk about?
I mean, look, I think we got to talk about the Chi-Yu, which is the other,
another one of the legendary EXs.
Another one of the legendaries. This is a fire one. It's a basic, only 190 HP, so pretty weak.
Small.
Yeah, very small.
It's a goldfish, Sean.
Very small. It is a goldfish. That's true. I didn't even notice that. Burning Envy is its first attack for 1 fire. Discard the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. Situationally, pretty good.
I mean, we saw Crag Lanch in the Hartford finals make a winning KO move. Who knows? Maybe Burning Envy will do the same.
And then its second attack for 2 fire, Flame Surge, 100 damage. Choose up to 3 of your bench Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a basic fire energy and attach it to that Pokemon. That, to me, like this seems like a really good setup attacker for future Charizard decks, maybe, because you can start setting up, their big attacks that I think do 330. I want to say. Now you might give up 2 prizes in the process, which isn't ideal, but
sometimes it's a necessary exchange, right? Especially again, Iono in the format. So who knows? Maybe you're okay with them taking 2 quick prizes, so then you can Iono them to 4 instead of 6.
Yeah, and look, that'll also work well with Reversal Energy. So Reversal Energy, which we'll get to later, if it works on evolution Pokemon, I believe it provides 3 of colors if you're down in prizes. So yeah, that Charizard, you do that. Attach the reversal on the next turn, Magma Basin 1 onto it on the bench. Boom, you got the 5 energy you need. All by turn 2 or 3 or whatever.
All by turn 2. That's exactly what you want to hear. But Sean, I will say, scroll down to the
Quaffle.
I still don't know how to. Whatever that Pokemon. I still don't know how to say this Pokemon's name. But this is a stage 2 EX 320 HP water Pokemon. So I think it's right in the middle of the 3. I think Meowscarda was the smallest at 310. But it's got 2 attacks. Number 1 is a single water energy, Lively Samba, 60 damage. Switch this Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon, then your opponent switches their active Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. So I think this acts a little bit like Escape Rope in where your opponent chooses what Pokemon they bring up. So it could be a little bit hurtful in that sense, but it could help, if they have what was it? Wu Chen?
Wu Chen, yeah. The 4.
Chen, if they've got Wu Chens, they've got to put one of those up that has a 4 retreat cost. So it could help you in that. And then the second attack, water and colorless propeller shot, 230 damage. Put 2 energy from this Pokemon into your hand. So it could work well with Baxcalibur, right? Putting the energies back into your hand. And then being able to accelerate it onto another Pokemon, which we'll talk about Baxcalibur here in a little bit for anyone who doesn't know.
I think it's weird. Like this one, I'm not sure what that 60 and switching accomplishes because your opponent does get to choose. So but I could also see this maybe working in a deck where you're playing a little control-y. Think about like the old Inteleon VMAX that would put a water back into hand. And if you're playing it kind of control-y with the Crushing Hammers, I know, worst thing in the world to say, but Crushing Hammers and maybe even Klefki. So the thing you're putting in the active is turning off the abilities. It's like a slow roll, control water deck, it's interesting.
It's more about, I feel like, controlling the pace of play,
Yeah.
rather than just a straight up, standard controlled deck that we know that he usually produces. But it's got an interesting set of attacks that maybe you want to watch out for. But Sean, what else should you watch out for in this set?
I'm looking through. I'm trying to find anything particularly interesting. You know, I will say I'm going to bring a couple of these up. I'm bringing up I think it's called Titan. Is that the name of it?
So Titan, yeah, I believe that's what it's called.
I'm only bringing this up not because I think it is in it of itself amazing, but there is an interesting archetype that Shay, over on Twitter, Shay Burton is a caster as well. But he made a really good video that talked about the Zoroark archetype and how you also have reversal energy, which I mentioned briefly, but if you're down on prizes, then you can attach this reversal energy. It provides 3 of any color of energy, but only if you're down on prizes, and it's a special energy. And I think Titan here, it's a water type, which doesn't really matter as much in the format, but it is 3 energy, and if it has any special energy attached, it does 140. So you can do 220 damage with this stage 1 Pokemon.
Without any modifiers.
Just
a single attachment of reversal.
Exactly. And I think I wanted to just point this one out. Like, this one may not be the one that you think about, but like, this is an example of like a kind of archetype that we might actually start seeing as a single prize deck, as a counter box, coming up very soon.
Yeah, I mean, we've now got Paldea evolved as well, so getting another slew of different types of Pokemon that you can use Zoroark to change into, to be able to hit weakness on literally whatever you want. So very, very cool, very, very interesting. I think I agree, Sean. It is one to note and look out for as well in your packs.
Yeah. But I mean, that's really it. I guess the next thing we could talk about, this kind of a wombo combo here, but
we could talk about them a little bit quicker because we've talked about these cards before. But coming up first, Baxcalibur, one of the pre-release promos, so you may remember this, has the ability Absolute Zero, the stage 2 160 HP water Pokemon. As often as you like during your turn, you may attach a basic water energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon. Like we mentioned earlier, this is anywhere on the board, as many times as you want. Just like Gardevoir, you can do it, you can do it for a couple energies in your hand, research, and then do it again as well, as it says, as often as you like. So very versatile and combos well with the water Pokemon next. Chin-Pao EX, I think is how you say it. But anyway, Sean, what does this Pokemon do?
Well, Chin-Pao says ability during your turn, Trembling Frost. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active, you could search your deck for 2 basic water energy, reveal them, put them into your hand, and shuffle. So you can get all the energy you need for the Baxcalibur, and its attack does 60 times damage. Discard any number of basic water energy from your Pokemon. It does 60 for each card you discarded in this way. So I look at this, Jake, and I'm kind of like, it's a weird combination. It's like water Blacephalon.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this could be a really cool archetype.
We've seen it in, I believe it was Thailand or Taiwan, one of those two countries, had a regional championship or like a major event that was streamed over the weekend. We saw some of these decks with the Baxcalibur Chin-Pao that were good, and that were very interesting. And yeah, like Sean said, that's the thing. You draw cards through something like Bibarel, right? Bibarel was very popular in this combo, but you evolve to a Baxcalibur, use a Chin-Pao to get the energies out of the deck, and then use Baxcalibur to put it anywhere on the field. The Chin-Pao that's in the active to hit those big numbers, or a Palkia.
Yeah.
V-Star? Yeah, Palkia V-Star onto the bench or maybe into the active, because you can also use that V-Star power of accelerating the energies from the discard pile onto your Pokemon. So being able to hit huge numbers off of Chin-Pao. could be really, really beneficial. But that's the wombo combo that provides. And so if you're in your pre-release and you pull a Chin Pao, you better hope you pull the Excalibur line too.
Yeah, that would be that's nasty. I did
You'll
see
pretty
somebody
much win all of your games.
like, you don't even have to discard that many energy. You just like
No, you literally discard 2 and you can
good.
just get to every single turn as it's in the active. So you just, if you pull Chin Pao in the Excalibur line, you really hope that you get a boss's orders somewhere in your packs or in your box as well.
Yeah, definitely this is going to be one of the top tier decks coming out of this set, I think.
Yes.
For sure.
One of the best new archetypes.
Jake, we can briefly talk about Pikachu here. So Pikachu EX, very cute, 190 HP. First attack is pointless, don't worry about it. Second attack, lightning, colorless, 220. Flip a coin. If tails, discard all energy from this Pokemon. Like, it's bad Miraidon. That's really all this is, Jake.
Yeah, I think you just play Miraidon.
It's got
overall.
free retreat. It does have free retreat.
Yeah, but there's better free retreaters that will actually get to probably later, maybe. There's plenty of other options. Very cool Pikachu card though. Illustrated by N-Design. I like this Pikachu, and then the Raichu on top of that, illustrated by Tezuro. Very, very cool cards, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not the most playable, though.
No, I mean, I just wanted to point it out, because Pikachu, if somebody pulls it, they're just going to be like, oh, is this good? And it's like, no, but, hey, good for you.
Fun. Collect the card for your binder,
Right, exactly. Let's see here.
I will say the Shinx is interesting in here. This little 40 HP basic electric rat Pokemon. Is it a rat? I don't know. It's more of a cat.
I don't know.
Either way, has the ability Loud Howl. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may have your opponent switch their active Pokemon with one of their benched Pokemon. So it can be a constant, disruptor in terms of being able to constantly switch. These are easy Pokemon to find with Nest Ball, Ultra Ball, Level Ball, things like that. They got knocked out pretty easy.
By Pokemon 40
being
HP.
only 40 HP, insanely low, a number that we don't see that often anymore in the Pokemon trading card game, because there's another Shinx in this set. It's 70 HP, so a big jump from that. But it is that Pokemon that allows you to disrupt your opponent in several situations. So interesting card that you could see as like a one of in certain decks that maybe have a lot of switching options with switch, rope, switch cart, things like that, or maybe even just retreating in general. But Sean, the evolution is one that's making some noise. Tell us about Luxray.
I mean, Luxray is cool. Ability, Vibrant Flash. So this is a stage 2. If you're not familiar with Luxray, I'm just going to set the stage. It's a stage 2, but its ability says once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in your hand and you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, you can just put it straight onto the bench. And you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, that's cool, but its attack must be trash. No, its attack for lightning, colorless, wild charge, 180 damage, 20 to itself, which is like, it's fine, whatever. But 180 damage, especially if you can get this down coming out of nowhere, like in any sort of, again, we mentioned that Zorobox deck with reversal energy, pretty broken, because you could just one-shot anything with a lightning weakness. But like, even if you're in like a Miraidon, like a Flaffy version, and you don't want to send another 2-prizer up, cool. Throw this Luxray down, 1 energy, a couple energy from the Flaffies, 1 from hand. You're good to go. 180 damage.
I will say as well in this, there are even other archetypes that are very interested in this card. I will say in the regionals that I was referring to earlier that happened over the weekend, if I can find it on Twitter, I believe it was Thailand. I'm sorry, the Thailand championships. There were some Gardevoir decks playing this card. in their decks because Gardevoir was playing the reversal energies, right? For the baby Gardevoir, a baby Gallade as well. Some people were playing Gallades, maybe to hit that fighting type weakness, or having the supporter searching Gallade. Cool different options, but some of them were also playing this Luxray. I believe one of the decks in the finals, I don't know if it was the winning deck or not, but one of the finals Gardevoirs was playing this Luxray and could use it for the turn. So there's a variety of decks that can use this card. Very, very cool. If you're a lightning deck, you're probably playing the card. But if you're also a deck that's playing reversal energies, very, very interested in this deck to be able to have a weakness to really just bop Lugias or anything that's weak to lightning. Palkias as well. It just really, really cool in my opinion. I love this card.
It's super awesome. Okay, what else we got going on here, Jake? Anything while I'm scrolling that you see that is tantalizing? Okay, we could, I guess, talk about Bellabolt.
Bellabolt. Love Bellabolt. Not necessarily its card, but just the Pokemon in general. It's real goofy.
What does this goofy Pokemon do, Jake?
This goofy Pokemon's got 2 attacks. This Bellabolt EX Stage 1, 280 HP Lightning type Pokemon. The first one, colorless Jump Press. This attack does 50 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Do not apply weakness or resistance for a bench Pokemon. So just really anywhere on the field, you can set up some damage for a cheap cost. But the second attack, Lightning colorless, is Paralyzed Ball. 160 damage. You may discard 2 lightning energy from this Pokemon, and if you do, the opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. So the ability to keep a Pokemon at bay in certain decks, and with, as Sean mentioned, something like Flaffy, right, in the format, you can get the energies stacked up on Bellabolt pretty quickly to be able to chain these Bellabolts. You'll have to have multiple on the field, though.
Yeah, I mean, I will say though, like, this is really good because if you think back to like a few years ago, the Raichu and Raichu, that had an attack that did, I think it was 160, and it paralyzed.
Yeah, I believe it was I believe it was the GX Plus. The GX Plus. You did the damage. You paralyzed them, and then you moved out of the active to the bench.
Yeah. So, I mean, the point of that was like, that was really powerful. Like, you don't think of paralysis being like, oh, it's a status condition, nobody cares. But with so few switch cards for a lot of decks in the format right now, if you hit them for 160 and they're paralyzed and they're not something that can evolve, then like they're just oftentimes going to be stuck there in this current format. So, if all you need to do is buy one turn to win the game, then this is probably a great way to do it.
And it's also worth noting that 160 is a pretty decent number to be able to one-shot things as well. So you may not even have to discard the energies as well against something like Lost Box. You can just strain knockouts left and right, and then when you get the heavy hitters in there, like maybe the Dragonite or something that's coming in, Dragonite can't knock you out one turn, but maybe you could paralyze it and keep it stuck in the active. Who knows?
Yeah. I don't know. I like this a lot. I don't know if it's worth multiple spots in a deck. That's the awkward part because it is a stage 1, but certainly worth looking into.
Another card that maybe you look into, Sean, which one are you thinking of right now?
I was actually just going to mention the Wattrel real quick.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm only mentioning it because this is, it has United Wings. I think the translation here is Wings of Unity, but the English translation is actually United Wings.
The official text on the card.
Exactly. And it is 2 colorless, does 20 for each Pokemon in your discard pile that also has a United Wings attack. What we know thus far is there are Wattrel, Murkrow, Flamigo, and I think there's one more.
There is one more, but I don't remember it off the top of my head.
The only thing about this, like, it feels like a Mad Party style deck. The benefit with this, though, is that you are hitting for very relevant weakness right now, at least. So you are hitting for lightning weakness with this Wattrel. You can hit for dark weakness with the Murkrow. And then the last one, I think I don't know which type it is, but
I think maybe there's only 3 of them.
There might only be 3. We'll see what the 4th one, whenever it comes out, is.
If there's one in the future that comes out.
So with any deck like this, obviously it's all about trying to turbo your way into a lot in the discard, which for a proper deck with Ultra Ball and research, it's very possible.
Hmm.
And if you play like a Curlia engine to like help you get through it, but yeah, what we've seen is unless you're hitting for weakness, these decks really do struggle. But that's my opinion. Jake, what do you think about the whole United Wings?
I think it's going. I mean, people just miss, like, they see these and they think of Lost March,
Hmm.
but I think the difference is that, like we've kind of, I think we talked about this last week, or I made the point where like people are like 20 times is super underwhelming now, unless like you're hitting for weakness. And then I made the point of like, yeah, Lost March was 20 times, right? Back in the day, but Pokemon also weren't 300 HP during that time. So a lot of times your Lost March, especially with things like, um, well, no, I don't think Electro Power was in the format, but they had stuff like Hypnotic Laser and stuff, other damage modifiers like that as cards. So like you could knock out Pokemon very, very easy, and it was a very, very strong Pokemon with a lot of different attackers. So I just don't think that Pokemon wants a deck to be that dominant like that.
A single
Um,
prize deck, yeah.
yeah, and so they've kind of like, because I think once you go, like, if you respond with, okay, well, to make it better, just make it 30 times. I think 30 times may be jumping the gun a little
It's too
bit, and to
much.
put it, yeah, like too much, as I mentioned the other week. So it's unfortunate, but at least, they're putting these different options with colorless attacking options, either colorless or just a single, like, because I think Murkrow, we'll talk about it, is a single dark energy for the attack.
Yep.
This Wattrell being double colorless. So giving you a little bit of options to be able to play around with the different attackers as well is nice. Instead of like Mad Party, where I think the Dene in Mad Party was like psychic colorless.
Mad Party was like it was an interesting attempt and it was a fun deck, but it
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, yeah, it just couldn't keep up because of the 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't hit for any relevant weakness for the most part, which was another problem. Which that's why I'm like, there might be more to this set to this one right now because of the weakness consideration, but that's not going to always be the case. Jake, yeah,
There's a Slow King EX. It's not that good. Just the Slowpoke is way better. And when I mean way better, I mean the art in the Slowpoke is so-so. I think it's so-so is how it's pronounced. And it's just an adorable art. So that's all you got to really worry about the Slowpoke line. I'd rather talk about this 90 HP Miss Magius,
oh,
Sean,
okay, let's do it.
as the next Pokemon. This is stage 1 90 HP Psychic Pokemon Miss Magius has the ability Magical Flick. When you play this card from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may choose an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon and move it to one of their benched Pokemon.
Hmm.
So I think a really interesting effect, because it's not just discarding the energy, it's moving it to a place where it's probably not good. There's definitely Pokemon that people will play that don't need the energies accelerated or attached onto it. So this could be an interesting kind of control card that gets placed in a Sander deck, to be able to just really hinder everything.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because we don't have Scoop Up Net anymore. So there's
Mm-hmm.
like, in terms of how you then pick these cards up after the fact, like, I think the best way to do that would really be like some sort of a collapsed stadium loop.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is interesting, especially if you're playing against decks that, like, if I am playing against Mew, this could be really annoying, especially if you're playing against the only double colorless Mew, the double turbo Mew. You move a couple of those double turbos to the whatchamacallit, the
Genesex.
yes, the Genesex, and they're just kind of stuck there, and you can't Silene them, right? Like, I guess they could like somehow retreat and then retreat later and then
But
Silene
that's
them.
that's a tough to do,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
So
awkward to do, but
yeah, I do like this, Jake. This is cool.
There's some potential in there, but I think there's a little bit more potential in the Spiritomb card that's next, Sean. What about this card makes it a little bit more worthy?
Well, I don't know. The ability, Pitch Black Disaster, as long as this Pokemon is in play, basic Pokemon V have no abilities.
Sean, do you know which basic Pokemon V this is going to affect most?
I mean, Chen Pao and...
Well,
it's
that's
not a Pokemon
EX,
V.
so no.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm really surprised that they said Pokemon V in this because it's referring to an old set rather than EX too. I guess this affects which
Drapion?
one? Oh yeah, this is good.
Mew, Genesect. Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't stop Mew because Mew doesn't have an ability, but Genesect, right? Yeah. Can't move stuff around, and this is in play too. This isn't just in the active, so it's a lot harder instead of a counter such as Path to the Peak, right? Mew can't Lost Vacuum this. Mew can't, counter it by taking it out with their own stadium as well. They have to knock out this Spiritomb to be able to do that, and that's just the first ones that I think of. There's more Pokemon V that may be able to. Raikou, right? Raikou, a big Pokemon in this format, can't use Fleetfoot.
Yeah, I mean, I
something
guess
of the
like
sort.
you can't Luminion. It's kind of like a more difficult to get rid of Path to the Peak.
Yeah,
like you said. I'm a little surprised though. I'm surprised that they have limited this to Pokemon V. I know that they are trying to. This feels very much like a design decision of like, hey, we want to push EXs. We want to push the format into EXs. So let's print a new card that will only get worse with time. And I just, it's not bad. It's just interesting.
This is also saying both you and your opponents.
Yeah.
In the description. So hopefully, you're not playing any yourself. I have seen lists that are playing this in Mew VMAX. Because Mew VMAX will, in a sense, once they're done withdrawing, but want to prevent their opponent, play the Paths of the Peak and then Lost Vacuum it.
Yeah.
To be able to start drawing cards again with the Genesect. So this may be kind of that same concept using Pitch Black Disaster. If you're pretty much set up for your Mew VMAX, you can put that Spiritomb down and be able to prevent your opponent from using a Genesect to respond KO you.
You're the Drapion.
Or I'm sorry, a Drapion, yeah.
Yeah. No, it is nice for that. It's really nice for like, hey, very specifically, I'm going to turn off your one card counter.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think about what else is out here.
There's an interesting Gothitelle, if you want to say that real quick.
There's so many like weird like control cards that I'm like, somebody at the Japanese Pokemon company just is best friends with Sander.
Somebody in charge of making Paldea involved, you said, you know what? Control cards.
So this Gothitelle, it is a stage 2, so it's a lot of work. But once during your turn, you can look at the top 2 of your opponent's deck, choose one. Put the card you choose on top and the other on the bottom. Weird wording, because it's like you choose one and you put that on top and the other on the bottom, where they could have also said choose one, put that card on the bottom and the other back on top. I don't know why they chose to word it so weirdly, but yeah.
It's just interesting, but it also has an attack Psychic Colorless for 120 damage. Discard a random card from your opponent's hand. Right, so you can not only discard the card from their hand, but also, in a sense, maybe prevent them to not be able to move anything from their hand with the card that they draw.
Hey,
kind of controlling their top deck in a sense.
Jake, maybe this is the play with Fortress. You Fortress them down to 2. You play this Gothitelle. You discard the one that they got. So now they're like what their top deck is. You have one card in hand, and then they're just kind of like, okay, cool. Rock and roll. Every turn, you're only ever going to have one card in hand with this attack. That's kind of filthy.
That's interesting to think about and to note. So, beware for Sander.
Jake, what does the Dene do? What's the big rat do?
I mean, it's 170 HP Psychic EX Pokemon. It does have a Psychic attack for Psychic Tail Swap. Move all damage counters from one of your bench Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. which is interesting. Wonder Shot at second attack for 3 psychic energy, does 170 damage, discard energy from the Pokemon. I mean, you can knock out opposing Dedenne EXs, I guess. But either way, Tail Swap could be interesting if you're in like the Gardevoir, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a basic EX Pokemon. You can use damage counters built up on like a Gardevoir EX, right? Up to 300 damage counters, and being able to move that from one of the bench Pokemon to the opponent's active Pokemon. You got to hope that it'll knock out the active Pokemon, but it could be pretty easy to manipulate as a one of. Because Cresselia and Gardevoir decks right now, I think it's only 2 damage counters from each Pokemon. So yeah, like you said, Sean, it's only a max of 120 damage. While this one has an output that can utilize up to 300 without any, health modifiers that we can talk about later. I think there's a tool card in the set that could help modify it, but could be interesting, a one of in those Gardevoir decks.
I love this for Gardevoir. And the reason being is, I think this is what the Wobbuffet V should have been. And they realized they got it wrong. Because Wobbuffet V, they like limited the amount of damage based on how big the Wobbuffet was. But like you said, this one, hey, you can actually swing in with your Gardevoir EX, feel fine with it getting hit for however much, because it's probably not getting knocked out. And then you load up a few more energy on there, get it to the max amount you can put. And then just Dedenne, you have these damage counters are yours now.
You get a damage counter. You get a damage counter.
And this might be a reason to play Radiant Alakazam in those decks, because if you can throw 300 and you're like, oh, maybe I'm like 10 damage short or 20 damage short. Well, that Radiant Alakazam will finish that off for you. So.
Yeah, your Radiant Alakazam can move it from one Pokemon to another if you're comboing it with the Lucha. But in my opinion, I don't know. That just feels like a bunch of different Pokemon for Gardevoir at least. But maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of different options that you could do with this and a lot of different things that you can try. So definitely look out for that card.
In terms of other cards here, I mean, there's this Mimikyu, which I'll briefly talk about. It has an ability... prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. So in certain matchups, like, that's a good wall. It's like, hey, we're going to print, what is it, Miltank basically, but for the new era. And its attack is putting 7 damage counters on your opponent's active, which is also nice because it gets around, the Gudras of the world, which will reduce damage taken for just 2 energy. So... yeah, I don't know if there's quite yet the format for this, because you have Gardevoir, you have some other one prizer.
I feel like we have a lot of things that also hit through effects of attacks now.
Yeah, like Mew, it'll hit through this. So it's a bit of an awkward space, but hey, look out for this in maybe a year or two, to be honest. Jake, what's the next one for you?
We'll talk about Tinkaton real quick. One of the pre-release promos has the ability to gather materials. Sean mentioned it earlier. Discard a card from your hand in order to use the ability, and once in your turn, if you do, you may draw 3 cards. It also has the attack for Psychic Colorless. 90 plus damage as this Pokemon has any special energy attack. It does 90 more damage. So for 2 energy, this stage 2 140 HP Pokemon can do 180 damage. And also draw you some cards. So pretty interesting, I feel like.
It's interesting. I think you're always going to question like this versus Kirlia, and I think you're almost always choosing Kirlia because the stage 2, you're either playing Rare Candy or you're trying to go up the whole line of Tinkatuff, which I just don't... like, the only reason that you would play this is if you're also playing the Tinkaton EX. And I just, I don't really see this seeing play over Kirlia. My thoughts.
I will say the Paldean Tauros, the fighting type. There's Paldean Tauros in fighting, water, and fire, and they all have this Rage Horn attack for 2 colorless. It is 20 plus damage. It does 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So you can be able to hit for weakness, and you can be able to, just based on water, fire, fighting, have a variety of different options for yourself to be able to knock out, but not anything like too crazy, I feel like, Sean.
Yeah, and also the fact that it's based on the damage counters on this Pokemon, I'm like, how you getting a bunch of damage counters on that? You know what I mean?
It'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
how you get that on some of these Pokemon. Some of them it makes sense and it's easier, like the fire one, but
Yeah.
a bunch of others not really.
Just moving along here. I don't know if I see any others. The Lycanroc EX I'll briefly mention. It does have fighting colorless, so you could use reversal. Does 140 damage, which is useful. And then during your opponent's next turn, if it's damaged from an attack, regardless of whether or not it's knocked out, you put 10 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. Yeah, that's like, it's
So
an
really
interesting
just-
deterrent.
I mean, really forcing them to be able to boss or rope or something like that and avoid KOing that Pokemon.
Yeah.
I will say it's probably the best illustrated EX
Oh, it's so
out
good.
of all of them. The Lycanroc is such a cool card by Kawayo. I believe is how you pronounce it. So excellent job. I'll just be getting the card for that in itself, to be honest.
Stop me when you find something interesting, Jake. The fighting Pokemon in this set, not that
I will
great.
say Glamora. Glamora on here has an ability. It's a stage 1, 130 HP Pokemon. When this Pokemon is knocked out, flip a coin. If head, your opponent can't take any prize cards for it. So again, kind of with this stalling aspect in prevention aspect, there's another card in here that says, you know what? Okay, it's going to make it a little bit harder for you to win the game. And it has a single fighting energy attack. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, and during the Pokemon checkup phase, put 6 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. So kind of bringing back the Weezing almost.
Yeah.
You know, the Galarian Weezing had that same single energy poison effect, but that was 4 damage counters, I think. So Glamora is 6. And then also can prevent prizes instead of preventing abilities.
I was gonna say, Jake, if I'm playing Mew and I hit through this, because it does 130, the Mew attack, does that still trigger the coin flip?
I don't.
That's a
We'd
weird
have to get an
question.
official ruling on that, but I don't think it does, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't. I would assume.
I
not,
mean, I think it
'cause
still
says-
activates. I think it still activates the coin flip.
because it says when the Pokemon is knocked out, so it's after
Yeah,
the
'cause
damage is dealt.
And the way that I think about this is it's an effect on itself. It's an
Yeah.
effect on the Glamora. It's not an effect on the Mew. So like Duraludon, for example, because the Mew has special energies, it can't hit the Duraludon. But the Glamora, no matter what your opponent does, as long as just it gets knocked out, right?
Yeah.
It can even be from like Sableye, right? Placing damage counters still activates this effect. So I mean, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure even a Max Miracle would cause this Pokemon to still flip the coin.
That is fascinating. I mean, I don't know. It's a big risky thing to do, but it's kind of
It's
cool.
Zoroark, right?
Yeah.
Zoroark stage 1, you can just prevent a lot of stuff. Very cool.
The next one here, we got Ting Lu. Just real quick, as long as its ability says Earth and Curse, as long as the Pokemon is in the active, your opponent's Pokemon that have any damage counters have no abilities, except for Pokemon EX. Why? Why did you need to add that?
Yeah,
And then it does
I don't
150.
know,
You
but
put
there's
2
still
damage.
there's still a lot of Pokemon that do have abilities, Sean. You think of Baxcalibur, you think of Bibarel, you think of Genesect, right?
Yeah.
There's still a lot of Pokemon that have Curlias, right?
Yeah. I mean,
there's still a lot of Pokemon that this can affect, but it would have been nice for the EXs.
I mean, it's also like, it's a big commitment. You have to leave it in the active, right? It has 3 fighting energy, which it's hard to do. Harder. I think the one nice thing about this is that if you combine this with Hawlucha, you could effectively turn off the entire Lugia engine turn 2. Play the Hawlucha, put this in the active, and say, you can't accelerate energy with those anymore until you knock this out and there's no more left.
It'll force a lot of decks, I feel like, that want to utilize this ability to use like Radiant Serena, but you'll have to put it down on the turn that you want to heal, and it may be that you only get that turn because Ting Lu's attack for fighting is 150 damage. Put 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So you can turn off a Radiance Arena if you're Ting Lu and be able to continue placing those damage everywhere and stopping abilities. So it's interesting.
It's interesting. You know what they need to do to get it out of this mess? Boss. Rope.
Boss.
It's
but,
like, it's so close.
I don't know. I mean, because you can stop a lot of the Pokemon from drawing cards, right? I mentioned Bibarel. I mentioned Curlia. You can stop a lot of those Pokemon from drawing. So it could be interesting, especially when you have Koraidon EX, right? That accelerates energies from the discard pile to your Ting Lu. So you can start placing those damage counters immediately.
Yeah, that's very true. Jake, what does this Paldean Clodsire EX do? Is it anything interesting?
Clodsire EX, 280 HP, stage 1 Pokemon, Poison Baga ability. Once during your turn, if there's a stadium in play, you may leave your opponent's active Pokemon poisoned. I think stadiums are very prevalent in the meta today, so you can continuously poison Pokemon, at least, with your Clodsire. And then for Dark, colorless, Needlebone, 200 damage, flip a coin if tails. This Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. We have plenty of switch effects, things like that in the format, so I wouldn't worry too much about it, but could be an interesting card in your Dark decks.
Yeah, I think the ability on this is really cool because it doesn't need to be in the active, right? It could just be on the field. So, like, Dark decks aren't great right now. It is a big dude, so it's like it's a lot of work to get through at 280. And like, but maybe leaving your opponent's active Pokemon poisoned. And if you're telling them, hey, you're going to need to retreat to get out of this, or I don't know, like,
or switch.
Right. Like, this could be.
But it also forces 10 more damage, right?
Yeah.
Without any sort of other damage modifiers on poison. This could hit for just 1 or 10 more damage, which could be the difference between knocking it out and leaving it active.
Yeah. I don't know. It's got a cool ability. I really like that. Going on now, I think we mentioned Murkrow, but there's the Murkrow. For 1 darkness, you do that Unity Wings attack. So just sort of reminding people that this one is another one of the United Wings.
One of the 3 in the set. The Honchkrow, don't worry about the Honchkrow. It's not really that great at all.
Weavile,
continuing on, Sean, is there another one that you like?
I mean, Weavile's kind of interesting. It basically has, when it moves into the active, you can choose one of your opponent's benched basics and move it to the active. I don't know exactly how good that is, to be honest, like, because it's very specific on benched basic Pokemon. But, you know, hey, it's a little bit of disruption.
I would say, you know, if it had like free retreat or something like that, would be way more interesting, I feel like.
Outside of that, though, in the darkness sphere, I'm really looking through and I'm like, I can't really see like anything that's particularly good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how much there is either. If you want to look at the Graffi, yeah. I'm not 100% sure. It does have a single dark colored attack, 1 single dark energy, 40 times damage. Discard any number of basic energy cards from your hand. This attack does 40 damage for each type of basic energy you discarded in this way. So there were some cards in the format not too long ago. Smeargle, I think Smeargle had a similar attack, but it was like show in your hand the amount of different colored energies. So pretty cool, I feel like. I like this same kind of style in the sense. It is a 90 HP level ballable stage 1, so who knows?
That is interesting. Yeah. Outside of that, that's really all the dark Pokemon. We're going into the metal types now. I'm trying to think. I guess we can just go straight to Caparajah EX, Jake. The ability, it takes 30 less damage from attacks. A pretty standard ability on these, like, you know, metal and whatever
gigantic
Pokemon.
Metal Pokemon. Stage 1, 300 HP metal Pokemon.
Yeah, and then it has this attack for 2 metal and a colorless, 260 damage. The attack also does 30 to each of your benched Pokemon, which, to be frank, may or may not matter. Yeah. And I do wonder, if all you have is Caparajah EX, right? And it takes 30 less damage from attacks. and you do an attack that does 30 damage to each of your bench. But if all of your bench Pokemon are Copperajah EX, do they take any damage?
I don't
It's weird.
know.
That's a weird. I doubt it. I mean,
Well,
meaning
it
I doubt
does
they
say
do. I
it.
assume they do.
I mean, I think they do because it does say from attacks. It doesn't say your opponent's Pokemon's attacks, so it doesn't specify what kind of attack it is. So I think maybe you're right in that it does prevent that. And you'll probably see people playing this with different heal cards like Radiant Serena, right?
Mhm.
Inside of this. I wonder if like Dialga V-Star, it plays like a Magnezone
Oh,
as
interesting.
well
Yeah.
to be able to accelerate energies and hit every single time. But this is a chunky Pokemon, so
Yeah.
who knows?
I mean, 300 HP with a 30 damage reduction from attacks is no joke. And then doing 260 damage, Jake. Like, I know that you are a fan of the Dialga V-Star. Does this interest you?
I think it does, but also it doesn't, because like when you're playing Dialga V-Star, I think you just keep Dialga V-Star as the lone attacker per se in the deck. I mean, sometimes you attack with Magnezone just depending on the matchup. I've come to find out there's some good numbers that you hit with the Magnezone. But with like Copperajah compared to Dialga, you use Dialga to try to get to that 5 energy cost, which is 220 damage, but and allows you to take another turn. And at that time, with those 5 energies, you're doing 240 damage, right? So any more energy that you accelerate can help you eclipse that. Now, it may be interesting to see Dialga be like use the V-Star power, but then move into a Copperajah, right? Because they're both technically stage 1s. The V-Star and Copperajah, to be able to have that set to 60. Who knows?
Yeah.
Because again, you can accelerate pretty easily, and it's more energy effective as well, trying to at least reach 260, right? It costs 3 less energies than Dialga would to be able to hit that. So I don't know. It could be something that maybe you play around with, but I just don't know if it would fit. It would have to be like a 1/1, I feel like.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's a good analysis, because I'm like, it feels like it's good, but maybe not good enough to warrant including it.
There's an option for it to be there, but I don't know if it'll work. The deck's already not great.
All right. Well, we can go to Noivern EX. The
Noivern
lone
EX,
Yeah.
it'll make a little bit more noise, Sean.
Yeah, the lone dragon Pokemon here. For 2 colorless, you do 70, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic, which in certain matchups is really good. Like, yeah, maybe they could like boss around this, escape rope around this, but like we mentioned the Chen Pao, I think it was the water type, the new water type basic. If you could just do 70 and prevent any damage done to it for a couple of turns, then you knock it out and you're good to go, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting. But for the second attack, Psychic Dark, 140. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any special energy or stadium cards. So I don't know. This is a very interesting kind of disruptive card.
Mm-hmm. We've seen different Noivern in the past do disruption. I think there was one recently that was printed that has an effect. Your opponent can't play item cards. So just moving along with 2 different disruption attacks. And I think this is really interesting because special energies are very prevalent, I feel like, in the format right now. Stadium cards are also prevalent. I think a lot of decks want to play a specific stadium in this format. So if you can use Noivern to just disrupt that by even a little bit, I mean, 140 is a good number too, to be able to hit a lot of Pokemon. Even 70 is a good number because that knocks out Comphase.
Yeah.
Right. So it could be pretty interesting to see where a deck like that goes.
Yeah, and it is a free retreater too. So like it does have a lot going for it, which is it's nice. It's strangely nice. Like
I think some decks were also thinking of like Regidrago V-Star,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Because you can have this Noivern EX in the discard. You never start like a Noibat, and you can use Regidrago to copy like some of these attacks. Um, you don't even have to have the energy cost, I believe. I think you just need the energy cost of Regidrago V-Star, and
Yeah.
then you can use any of the attacks available to you from Dragon Pokemon in your discard.
So Jake, do you think that Regidrago V-Star is in a good enough place that it should see more play soon?
It'll probably see more play, but I don't think it'll be like meta defining in
Okay.
any sense. Like, I don't think it. I think probably Chen Pao and Baxcalibur are a better deck still.
Yeah.
So I don't think it becomes a top deck, but I think it's a deck that you could see more frequently at like locals and stuff like that.
Okay. Okay.
It'll be
Uh,
interesting.
I'm trying to see what in the colorless world is any good.
The
Uh,
Fafhrigir, I don't know if it's good, but it has an interesting attack for one colorless stage 1 140 HP Pokemon. Choose either yourself or your opponent. That player shuffles their hand in their deck and draws 4 cards.
that's interesting.
It's
I
something that we haven't really seen.
yeah. It is interesting that you can choose either person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure what the combo with that is. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
I
nice and
guess just like a
disruptive.
prevention type of thing. Yeah, just a
Yeah,
disruption kind of deck. It's just a stage 1 option to help
yeah.
disrupt.
So that is kind of interesting. But yeah, it's a lot of interesting disruptions. But Jake, I think the one that we should probably talk about, and we mentioned it again, I think on our pre-release stuff, but is Pelipper.
Mm-hmm.
It has the ability, Rumor of the Wind, when you play it from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you might either search your deck for a supporter and put it into your hand, or search your discard for a supporter and put it into your hand. And that flexibility is really good. The question is, does it replace Luminion?
I don't know if it does because it's 120, so it's really susceptible to Sableye.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's only one prize, so who knows? It's definitely going to be in a Zoroark deck. Because
Because you have to play it from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon.
oh, never mind, you're right. Okay,
Yeah.
so no, I'm just a big fat liar.
No, I mean but it's an important, because I think people might make that mistake, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's a tempting card, but I think the benefit of something like Luminion, even though it gives up 2 prizes, is it is immediate. Like, I need the thing now. I don't need it on a future turn. I need it now.
I will say a normal type Pokemon that's going to get more play than Pelipper is Squawkabilly EX with the ability Show Off during your first turn. Once during your first turn, you may discard your hand and draw 6 cards. You can't use more than one Show Off each turn. I've seen this card in a lot of lists as a Pokemon that you get early, again, on that first turn to really help you on that setup. It's easy to find with Nest Ball. It's easy to find with Ultra Ball, Battle VIP Pass. Very, very interesting support card that you can get away, with a Collapse Stadium or something of that sort, with a Penny.
Yeah.
As well, picking up basic Pokemon. I think Volo works with this as well. I don't remember what Volo is.
I don't
But I think
know
it
if
deals
Volo
with
is
normal type
Vs.
Pokemon.
Sharon's Care would be colorless.
Yeah, Sharon's Care as well as another card that definitely works on it. So, but Volo, discard one of your benched Pokemon via and all cards attached to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't affect this one, but yeah, I mean, look, you've got Penny, you've got Collapse Stadium, and you've got Sharon's Care that are all options to get this out of there if you need to. And to be honest, look, if you don't do that on the first turn, you can still do its first attack for 1 colorless and attach 2 basic energies to one of your benched Pokemon, accelerate, draw some cards. Like, it's not terrible, honestly. And then if it's in a matchup where your opponent doesn't have the answer to this on turn 2, then hey, like, you don't have to worry all that much. You find a way to get rid of it later. So if you are in like a super turbo deck, this might actually be a great card.
It might it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. The next one, Flamigo, we talked about Flamigo, 110 HP, basic Pokemon, has the Wings of Unity. It also, though, compared to the other Wings of Unity or United Wings Pokemon, this one has an ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you may search your deck for up to 3 Flamigo, reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle your deck. So you could literally put you could put the rest of your Flamigos in the deck. Once you slap that bad boy down onto your bench, you can go get the rest of them and then use a research or whatever to put them in the discard pile. Very
use
cool,
a Squawkabilly.
Yeah, or use a Squawkabilly in combo with this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe, I mean, this, when we talk about the United Wings and like how it's just a shadow to something like what Lost March was, this is one of those things to help you out on like a first turn of the game or something to be able to get those damage up quicker. And one of the cool things that's probably in the pre-release kits too, with this Pokemon being able to really just ramp up and be able to put you 60 damage right away on the United Wings attack.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I played this. It was wild going and getting 3 of these out of my deck, and it was just like, yeah, okay. Now there's no more Flamigos in my deck. So but that's it for the Pokemon, Jake. Are you ready to get through the trainer cards?
I will say the first stadium Artisan, once during each player's turn, may search their deck for a basic Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box and put it on their bench, then shuffle the deck. I feel like some people may start playing this over Mesagoza because Mesagoza is a coin flip, so it's no guarantee. This just limits you a little bit more of no rule box Pokemon. So
and basic
could be
only.
good in something. Yeah, so it could be something in better setup for like Gardevoir.
Yeah.
Right? Or any sort of Pokemon that plays, you know, a bunch of baby Pokemon, Baxcalibur, right?
Lost
Being
Box.
able to, Lost Box as well. So I think this has some play as well, but it's not necessarily bumping Mesagoza out of format.
Yeah, I mean, it really is deck dependent, to your point. Like, you have to be a deck that relies on a lot of single prizers. But as we get more and more into these EXs that are stage 1s and stage 2s, I think this has a lot of value. We have a really weird boss's orders here. Interesting.
What do you mean really weird?
I mean, the art on this, Jake. What?
No, this is
cool.
Jetsis. This is arguably one of the best boss's orders.
Yeah, I want to see the full art for this one. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think if you scroll down more, you'll be able to see it. But anyways, let's continue on. Boss's orders, if you don't know, supporter card, switching an opponent's bench Pokemon with an active Pokemon. It's a reprint just with a new, mark and character. But Bravery Charm, a tool card, the basic Pokemon this card is attached to gets 50 plus HP. This is a big deal for people we're saying with Drifloon, right? Because Drifloon, little basic Pokemon, does more damage for each damage counter on it. And so with Gardevoir EX, accelerating energies and also damage counters on it can help beef it up and do, I think, like upwards of 300 damage with a single swing. So interesting for the basic attackers, Sean.
No, I really like this card. I think, you're right. In certain matchups too, like if you can make some of these base like Chen Pao or whatever, just huge as well. That's so annoying. So annoying.
It can make the math a little bit tougher. So there's a couple other stadium cards in here, Sean. Calamitous Snowy Mountain, attaching when any player attaches an energy card from their hand to one of the basic non-water Pokemon, put do damage counters on that Pokemon. I don't know if this is in the know. I feel like there's a lot of effects right now are just not from the hand.
It's kind of like Old Cemetery, honestly.
Yeah.
So like I just there's too much not from the hand energy acceleration, and the fact that it's basic non-water Pokemon, it's not even like, it doesn't even stop the Chen Pao, which is like, okay, well, what do I do with this? So
there is another Calamitous Stadium, Calamitous Wasteland. The retreat cost of each non-fighting basic Pokemon is colorless. There's not really fighting Pokemon in the format, Sean, so this could be interesting.
I mean, imagine bumping a beach court for this against Lost Box. Like, that would be so annoying. Like,
That
granted,
makes it even harder for them to be able to retreat their come phase.
well, they can't just do the attach retreat little combo there. They have to use as many of their like actual switch cards, and the more that they have to use, the less they end up doing. And so, I don't know. It's an interesting card.
It's a cool one. There's a reprint of Choice Belt as well. Again, if you don't know, Choice Belt tool card, 30 more damage for each of your opponent's active Pokemon V. If you're in a deck that plays Choice Belt, I highly recommend getting this new art to help you out, because remember, tool cards were errated recently. They're now not item cards anymore. So the old Choice Belt has the item card symbol, this one having a tool card. So I mean, most people will just know, but in order to help you out, make sure you don't play mistakes, especially if you're like a newer player or someone who hasn't been playing for a really long time. You might want to just put this one in there to help you in IRL play. Remember, hey, this is its own subcategory now. Yeah.
I'll briefly mention Clavel or Clavel. Search your deck for 3 basic with 120 HP or less and put them into your hand. I think the put them into your hand is crucial here, because there used to be Professor Elm's lecture that would put them onto the bench, which is not bad. But like, again, if you have a deck that wants to discard Pokemon for whatever reason, United Wings, a really great option for you here. I don't know if it's necessarily better than other supporters you might want to play on a turn, but thoughts.
It can help you out. There's an interesting supporter as well. Dendra, put a card from your hand at the bottom of your deck, then draw cards until you have 5 in your hand. There is a clause in there, though, that says if you have no other cards in your hand, you can't play this card. So you can't just Dendra. Well, you have to have at minimum 3 cards in your hand, I think, before you play Dendra.
1.
So Dendra is 1.
Well, you can't play Dendra with no cards in hand afterwards, but you can play Dendra with 1, because you have another card. So you play the Dendra, you put 1 on the bottom, and then you draw 5 effectively.
Okay.
So
yeah, I was thinking you needed an extra card, but maybe you don't in that sense.
So like this, I mean, hey, look, this is interesting. Maybe this is like a good Squavit combo if you're not playing Bidoof for some reason. Like say you have Squavit and you don't want to play the Bidoof line, and you're like, well, I'll just play Dendras with Squavit. Rock and roll. Like, that's actually not terrible. Maybe you don't want to discard, and maybe you don't want to shuffle. This is your other option.
It'll be interesting to see. I do think that it's only going to be like a 1 of index, though. I don't think it's going to be really any more than that. But Sean, what else is in here?
I will just briefly mention, like, Fighting Olay. If you have more prize cards remaining, you can heal 60. So, like, heal 60 as an item is no joke, but it's very specific.
It's interesting. I forget how to say this character's name. I know somebody, I think it was OKJ Love was saying, because it's it's an Italian name, so it's not as it looks. I can't remember exactly how it is, if you said it correctly or not. I should have.
I think it's Giacomo, but it could be Giacomo. Maybe?
I think it's Giacomo.
Yeah. So,
but anyways, it's a supporter. Discard a special energy from each of your opponent's Pokemon. Very, very interesting in control and stall decks, because like Sean and I talked about earlier, special energies are very prevalent in the format right now. Something like Lugia, something like Fusion Mew, right? There's a lot of special energies running around.
Yeah, this card is disgusting against that, because like you also think we talk about control a lot, but like Sander is playing 3 or 4 Yveltals in his decks to get rid of all this special energy in the format. Well, heck, you don't need to even bother with Yveltal anymore. Just play Giacomo. Boom. Just get rid of all that. The fact that it's like it's only 1 energy from each of your opponents, so like that may matter, but you could potentially get a lot more energy out. So if you're playing against even the new Fusion Strike Mew, they're going to be loading up a Meloetta. They're going to also have a couple of energies spread across maybe 1 or 2 Mews. You get rid of 1 from each of those, and you get to choose which ones you get rid of, right? So like, okay, maybe you don't want that Meloetta to attack. Get rid of all of the Fusion Strike energy. So
there's a lot of different options. I feel like this is best as a surprise card.
Yes.
Right? Because you for example, a way to counter this as a Mew player or a Lugia player, if you're aware that they play a Giacomo, what you do is you just don't attach energies everywhere. You just attach energies on one single Pokemon, right? You only Archeops to one single Pokemon at a time, or you only use Alyssa Sparkle onto one of your fusion Pokemon. That's a good way to counter Giacomo, but I feel like Giacomo still has a lot of value in being able to really just prevent your opponent from, continuing to advance their board state.
Outside of that, the
Great Ball's being reprinted. We don't need to talk about it, though.
Great Ball's like Grusha is interesting, but I don't think it's particularly useful, in my opinion. Drawing up to you.
It's an interesting, beginning of the game. Like, how Lily was really, really good. You know, if it was your first turn, you got to draw up to 8 cards. Grusha kind of feels like a reincarnation of that. If you don't know what we're saying, draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. If you have no energy attached to any of your Pokemon, draw up to 7 instead. So again, it's best utilized, I think, in the beginning of the game.
Maybe, yeah. But for me, the problem with this card is it's not a shuffle. If it was shuffle and draw, great. That's Lily. This is just draw until.
No, Lily wasn't shuffle draw.
Lily not shuffle and draw? Interesting.
No. That was like Cynthia.
Right. Yeah, Cynthia
for
was
Bruno.
Shuffle
Bruno is the shuffle, and then if a Pokemon got knocked out, draw more.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, but I don't know. You could have a bad hand with this in it, and you're only drawing 2. At that point, play hop. I mean, the next card, we've talked about it a lot. It's Iono.
It's the chase card of the set.
Yep.
It's going to be the most expensive.
This one, Jake, please, what does this new staple supporter do?
You might want to know and listen up, open up your ears, because it's going to be everywhere in most decks. Iono, a supporter card. Each player shuffles their card and puts it at the bottom of their deck. Then each player draws a card for each of their remaining prize cards. Apologies, I was burping. But this is the comeback card. This is the card that everybody's been asking for to come back. Some iteration of late game mechanic. If you're down on prizes, this can help you come back into the game, allowing you to draw a ton of cards at the beginning of the game as well. Really help you out getting 6. But if you've got a board state that is better than your opponent, right, and you don't mind getting down to a super small hand, you can just play the Iono. You draw 2 cards, but they also draw 1 card, and you might be at a board state to where you're okay with that, and they might not be. So Iono is going to be used in a ton of different decks. It's going to be used a lot. I don't know if it's a 4 of in every single deck, but it wouldn't be all that surprising to see Iono be a 3-4 of in a lot of decks.
I mean, Marnie was a 4 of in a lot of decks, and Iono.
I feel like we have more draw supporters though than we did with Marnie in the Sword and Shield set. We have Colress. We have Marnie.
No, we don't.
We don't have Marnie. We have Research. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, we had Research before though too, when Marnie was around.
Yeah, I just feel like we have more draw options now in the format than what we did when Marnie was super prevalent. But I could be wrong about that.
I mean, to me, you get disruption early game. It doesn't punish anyone necessarily, but it is disruption early game. And then to your point, it's a late game comeback card at the same time. And for me, that combination of because the reason you wouldn't play Marnie in other decks is you're I need cards in hand. I need a lot of cards. And shuffling down to 4 just feels bad to yourself on turn 1 or 2. But I don't know, you're good. It's just basically like a Marnie plus Cynthia. But later it's a Marnie plus N, and all of a sudden it's broken.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this card play out. And really influences the format for decks like Lost Box and things like that. But Sean, is there anything else in here? There's a couple more that are nice.
There's a couple more cards. We have Super Rod that I'll touch on. Shuffle up to 3 in any combination of Pokemon and basic energy from your discard pile. So if you've been missing Ordinary Rod, congratulations. Here is a sort of version of that. You get Super Rod back.
Super Rod is a there was an old super rod. I believe there was an official,
Yep.
not necessarily an official announcement, because I
an
think it was
errata.
like it was like a posting. It wasn't necessarily like an official, hey, by the way, the old super rod cards are errated for this. So if you have been playing a long time or you've got some older super rod cards, you can utilize this. It was very good and it will be very good.
You can use them
in the format.
You can use a certain number of them. Some of the really old ones you can't use.
I thought you could use all of them.
There is some super rods from like Fossil or stuff that you can't use, but they did errata them back quite far. So
yeah,
but yeah,
at least I think like the XY one.
Yes, the XY one for sure. And then the other card here that is really worth mentioning is Superior Energy Retrieval, which
this is also a reprint.
It's a reprint. It's an amazing card. If you're playing that Chen Pao deck, load up on 4 of these. You can use this card only if you discard 2 other cards from your hand. Then you put 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile directly into your hand for an item card. This is broken, Jake.
It's also worth noting that you cannot discard energy cards for the superior energy retrieval and then get those energy cards back. It does say on there you can't choose a card you discarded with the effect of this card. But still, as Sean is saying, this is a very good card. This is a very relevant card as well for decks that play a lot of basic energy. Your Chin Pao, as you were saying, your Gardevoir even potentially. I mean, Gardevoir you might not necessarily want it because I think if you
I don't know about that.
I mean, it could still help you in terms of if you want an attachment, right? You can accelerate a bunch of energies, only leaving like 1 left in the discard pile and then being able to get 1 back. There's a lot of different options for this. Dialga, the Dialga V-Star fans, rejoice. It could help you out with that. But anyways, this is really, really good. This is one that you're going to see a lot of. This is one that you want to get, and also pull out your old ones as well.
Yeah, and it is put up. This has put 4 basic energy. So I don't know if this is a translation thing. I don't know if it's up to on the actual version. But
yeah, I don't know either.
The interesting thing about that, it will be important to remember when you get your real card, check if it has up to or if it has 4. If it does not have up to, you have to put as many as you can to fulfill that. So you won't be able to do this for like 1 energy or 2. So like if you're playing a Lost Box deck and say you need a couple of energy in your hand to attach and you need the rest for like Kyogre or whatever, you'll have to put all 4 if they're in there if it doesn't say up to. Just really important note.
It would be more effective to use Energy Recycler first to put up to 5 energies back into your deck. And then with the leftover you have remaining, use it for Super Energy Retrieval.
Big brain, Jake. This is true.
There is also some interesting special energies in here. The first one, Jet Energy. This has been really good in Japanese decks from what I've been seeing and listening stuff. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides colorless energy, just a single colorless. But when you attach this card from your hand to one of your bench Pokemon, switch that Pokemon with your active Pokemon. And so it's basically a force retreat. So very prevalent in things like Lost Box, right, that want to have a lot of retreats. You can not only use this to shoot a Comfey into the active, but also use that energy to retreat your Comfey.
Yeah.
And use your retreat for the turn. So very, very cool energy. I've seen this in a couple different lists. I think Lugia is playing it too.
I mean, yeah, it does seem good for Lugia because if you have that in your hand, you can switch something out. It's also interesting in an Arceus deck. Because you can imagine an Arceus deck being like, okay, well, normally, like, you really want Arceus in the active, even though it might get bopped, because you're like, okay, I'll keep it in the active. That way I don't need to use the ability of Arceus to go find a switch card. But with this, cool, you could just leave it in the bench, attach a double turbo on turn 1, attach this Jet Energy on turn 2, move it to the active to then attack with it.
It'll be interesting. There's a lot of different options alongside of it, along with maybe not as prevalent, but still very cool because I think of the effect makes it very interesting. The Luminous Energy. as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides every type of energy, but only one energy at a time. But if it has any other special energy attached to it, it provides, the card, if it has any other special energy attached to it, so you have 2 luminous energies on a Pokemon, it turns the luminous energy into one single colorless energy.
Yeah. So, or like this plus a double turbo does not work.
Yeah. It
So-
just makes it so you only have 3 colorless energies in your Pokemon.
So
Which could have some good stuff, but I don't know.
So, I mean, obviously, this was designed to not give Lugia the access to rainbow energy again. It's interesting. It favors your counter decks pretty heavily, like counter single prizers, particularly that may only need a colorless energy. May only need one color of energy, and then you can attach another random one. But it does it in a way that doesn't rule out Vs and EXs, which I like. So I think this is a very balanced, a little bit of a letdown for some people, I think, but a very balanced version of Rainbow Energy.
But Sean, there's another Rainbow Energy that we've kind of talked about a couple times. What is it?
We have Reversal Energy here. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides colorless. But if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, and if this card is attached to an evolution Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box, so a lot of ifs here.
A lot of ifs going on.
But if you got an evolution that is a single prizer, it can provide every type of energy, but only 3 energy. I don't know why, but it also 3.
I don't know why it's but only, but
it provides
3 rainbows.
3 rainbow energies if you're behind on prizes, and it's on an evolution that's a single prizer. You know, like we were saying, if you're going to play a cool counterbox deck with Zoroark, this is the card that you have been waiting for. Really, really cool card in certain decks. Like Jake was saying, too, really good with that Luxray, the new Luxray.
Really good with the Luxray, really good with the Gardevoir decks as well. Yep. You know, the little baby Gardevoir. You know, attaching the energies through Psychic Embrace or whatever Gardevoir EX's ability is. This reversal energy will allow you to hit, I believe, over 300 or at 300.
I mean, look,
you get to hit way more.
And the thing is, you can attach more than one of these at a time. It does not say that you can't. So if you got 2 of these in your deck and you throw, you know, I don't know how you throw. If you're one on one turn and one on another, I guess, like 6 energy on that Gardevoir is, I think, already like 220 damage or something, or 240.
Keep in mind as well that this card is always an energy, right? So with Gardevoir's ability, the baby Gardevoir, allowing you to look at the top 2 cards, if any of them are energy, attach them to your Pokemon, I believe in any way you'd like.
It does say in any way you would like. I would need to look at the card, but to see if it says basic energy or psychic energy.
No, I think it's any energy.
Okay. Yeah.
I think this energy works on it as well. So again, you can really start hitting heavy with that. And even if it's not, even if I'm just lying and making stuff up, still just a single attachment of 3 energy is so good in that deck. It makes Gardevoir really good. Gardevoir gets a huge boost out of a lot of the cards that we've talked about in this set. Iono, Reversal, Energy, Super Rod, right? Comboing Super Rod as well with that little baby Gardevoir.
Yep.
Pretty good.
Last energy is therapeutic. It basically says you can't be asleep, confused, or paralyzed, and if you are, you recover from that. I'm just going to say, not great. Not a great energy, very specific. I wish they would have attached Poisoned and Burned to this as well. Because to me, then, okay, maybe it finds utility in 1 or 2 decks, but...
I will say this is interesting. I've seen people play this in something like Lost Box with the inclusion of the Snorlax, that puts itself to sleep. When it attacks, you can attach this and just wake that bad boy up. You don't have to attach you don't have to flip the coins if your opponent doesn't respond with a KO. So has a little bit of niche ability attached to it, but I mean, like Sean was saying, I don't know. It's not going to be broken.
Clearly not. No. Oh, man. Well, Jake, that is our Paldea Evolve set review.
Plus a little bit more.
Plus some extras, yeah. A very long pod this time. Very long pod. But our set reviews are always a little long.
It is, and there's a lot of cool cards in Paldea Evolved, in my opinion. I'm very excited, especially we didn't even get to like the beautiful cards, right? All of the illustration rares, the art rares, things like that, the alternate arts for all of the cards. This is just, in my opinion, like I'm so excited to open this set. I'm so excited to go to the pre-release because I think it's going to be a really, really fun set for collectors, players, just anybody who's a fan of Pokemon cards.
Yeah, I will say I did open a Dendra alternate art at my pre-release yesterday.
Oh, so nice.
People were excited about that. But yeah, fingers crossed that you get the Iono, both to you, Jake, and to anybody out there.
Don't buy the Iono yet. Hold out on the Iono. The pre-release prices are so absurd right now for that card. So just wait a little bit for the actual set to release, maybe a little bit longer. Well, if you're playing at NAIC, you might want to have them by NAIC. But
I mean, I guess.
Anyways,
Jake, question.
Anyways, just
what price do you think Iono is going to land at? Just give me a number.
Are you talking about the regular art
or the good one? The good.
The good one is definitely going to be over $100.
That's where you think it's going to land. Okay.
Yeah, I think because so the difference, like Miriam's sitting at like $65, I think, right now, the alternate art Miriam, and that out of the gate was super expensive. But Miriam is not super playable. It's like really niche. Whereas in comparison, Iono is going to be super playable. It's going to be in almost every meta deck. And it's going to be potentially a 4 of. So I think that one is definitely going to be over $100. I think it's going to be like 150 USD. When it kind of settles in, because there's also like multiple arts of the Iono. And so you have like a seemingly more valuable one, because I think like for the Miriam, the regular full art is $35 to $40, something like that, and then the alternate art is like $65, $75. Somewhere in that range. So I think Iono is going to be like between 125 and 150. Here in a couple of weeks after, I think like after the set releases, I would say. I was just curious. I want to get like a little pin on that, you know? Yeah, just see where it lands. Just don't buy your regular Ionos yet. Just don't buy them yet. Just wait a little bit. It'll also get reprinted in a bunch of probably like trainer decks and stuff like that. Trainer toolkits, the EX battle decks or whatever. So there, it'll get cheap quickly in terms of the regular art if you don't want to spend money on the alternates and stuff. Just go look at Research, Marnie, and Boss, man. You can pick those up for $1, maybe less. Yeah, those are so easy to get now. You just had to wait a little bit of time. All right, well, Jake, take us away. That's all for the Metapod podcast this week. Thank you so much for listening. I'll tell you about my pre-release experience next week, and on Twitter at MetapodTCG. You can go follow us. But thank you so much for listening to the podcast that revolves around the evolving meta.